Hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about two terms that most students don't understand. They are allowance for impairment of trade receivable and impairment loss on trade receivable. Why is it important to know what they really mean? Because when you don't know what it is, you don't know what to do. Before we start, let's understand what is trade receivable. The definition stated is that this is the amount collectible from customer for goods and services provided on credit. Which is the most important term in this definition? It is the word collectible. Put in other words, trade receivables are customers you can call and demand payment because they have taken your goods without paying. Now, let's look at this term allowance for impairment of trade receivable and link it to the definition. First, let's just break down the definition into three parts. First part is the one allowance. Second is impairment. The third one is of trade receivable. Let's begin with the simplest one. Of trade receivable simply means the amount owed by credit customers. Impairment. So what does impairment mean? Impairment is actually the opposite of improvement. So what it simply represents is there's a decline in value. And you can use one word to basically capture the meaning here, which is uncollectible. So let me use this thing, let me paint it green. And you can find this word here. So the last part, allowance. What is actually allowance? Allowance simply means we are providing for a possible outcome. So if you go back to possible, what does it mean? It's the idea of maybe. So you will see that the idea of this maybe, right, is captured in this word. So if you look at this definition of allowance, right, what it simply represents is this thing here, that is the amount owed by credit customer that may be uncollectible. That's all. Let's take one step further. If trade receivable, which is related to collectible debts, has a debit balance, then allowance for impairment of trade receivable should have a credit balance since it is related to uncollectible debts. Students always ask me how to relate allowance to trade receivable. It's actually very simple. Just remember the word of and take the allowance as part of trade receivable. So in other words, if you make it simply, that the trade receivables is the whole thing, while allowance is the part. So in the example below, right, the total trade receivable is 10,000 and the allowance of 2,000 is part of this 10,000. Next definition, impairment loss on trade receivable. This is the loss suffered when the amount due is uncollectible. So you will ask me, what is the difference between this impairment loss and allowance? Let me paste the definition of allowance here. Put it simply, impairment loss on trade receivable is a cost of doing business, which is an expense. Let me highlight it in green. Whereas the allowance for impairment of trade receivable represents a possible decrease in asset. Let me highlight it in yellow. The possible decrease is represented by maybe uncollectible. Hopefully this explains the differences between these two terms. That's all for today. I just want to cover the definitions for allowance and impairment loss in this video. I would suggest you to replay the video a few times to grasp the gist of what I'm saying. Please post your comments either in YouTube or Telegram. I will take your feedback seriously and improve the quality of my videos.